Okay, it looks like we're live. Can we just get a confirmation? Yeah. Welcome on behalf of the K12 Online Conference. This year's conference has taken a new form. We're delighted to be hosting the second in a series of panel discussions based on the keynote presentations. Tonight, our panelists will be talking with David Jakes about the ideas presented in his four-part keynote, Reimagining the Spaces in Which We Learn. Feel free to put comments or questions in the chat. If you tweet, please tweet with the hashtag K12 Online Conf, just ending with the CONF. My name is Susan Van Gelder. I'm joining you from Montreal in Canada. On the panel, we have David Jakes, who's joining us today from Mexico. Brian Ham from Monterrey in Mexico. We have Kevin Jarrett from New Jersey, not in Mexico. And we have Mike Morrison from Laguna Beach in California, Carolyn Foote from Texas, and now I will turn things over to David.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that, and welcome everyone. It's my honor and privilege to be involved in the K12 Online Conference this year as a keynoter, talking about reimagining spaces. And the keynote up with an engaging discussion tonight with four people that are doing really exceptional things in schools relative to learning spaces. So we're excited to bring you some insights from practitioners that are actually doing things, and we hope to bring you and give you some ideas that will help move you forward in terms of how you think about spaces, in terms of how you the role that spaces play in learning, and how you might craft better spaces for kids. So with that in mind, we have a range of questions that we're going to ask. And we're going to ask the panelists to begin by responding to the very first question, and that is really giving each an opportunity to sort of ground the conversation by explaining exactly what they're doing with the learning spaces. So I'd like to begin with Carolyn, if that's okay. And Carolyn's done. We'll just jump in, and anybody else can take over after that. So go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, great. So my name is Carolyn Foote, and I'm a district and high school librarian at Westlake High School in Austin, Texas. And I've been both involved in learning space redesign as a librarian with a quite large renovation of my own library 7 or 8 years ago. And then more recently, I've been leading a pilot in our high school to make our classrooms better reflect the student experiences that we want to have. And so we've been working with 25 model pilot classrooms this year. And myself and our instructional partner who works with our humanities teachers have led this work along with the help of David and a committee of teachers and students at our school. And so we've been doing a lot of surveys and gathering data from teachers in order to see if we were accomplishing some of our goals of changing some of the classroom expectations and allowing teachers to try to do things that they had not felt like they could accomplish before in their previous setup in their classrooms. So it's been a really fascinating process.
Kevin, go ahead. Kevin, are you there?
We can't hear him.
Brian, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Well, good to be here. So I'm at American School Foundation of Monterrey, Mexico, and we're kind of doing something similar to Carolyn. So I'd love to touch base and see some of your prototypes and what they look like. But really, we're carving out what we want the learning experience to look like with user groups. And we ran some prototypes with students, and we're bringing on parents and teachers and really developing what we call inspiring learning spaces. And I think that's similar to terms that you've probably used at your schools. And it's really exciting. I'm in a room right now that's been in prototype mode for 2 years now, and it's continually growing and being modified and changing. And I think it reflects what learning we want to see in the classroom. And so I think we need to be agile, and we're starting to see that slowly. And so it's an exciting time to be an educator today.
Okay, Mike?
Yes. So I come up to this conversation with three hats. I was a teacher, and I'm the chief technology officer for the district, but I'm also a business owner in Irvine. So we have a space there, and that's how I was invited into this conversation, because in that space we moved locations and we had an empty spot, and we had to think about what we were going to do, what kinds of things we were going to do at work, and what kinds of activities we were going to do, and how the space would support that. So in that process, I started realizing that technology has actually damaged our learning spaces in schools. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Basically, when I walked into classrooms, the lights were out, the blinds were drawn, and the projector was showing, and it was very dim, and I call it the learning dungeon. So what's happened is that our spaces have kind of turned into this bad thing as a result of technology, which we thought it would improve those spaces, but it doesn't. So we started a process, it's been about 3 years, of redesigning our spaces in our district with a holistic approach. So we look at like the smell of the room, the temperature, everything that affects a person as a human. We looked at safety, the feelings, the emotions, everything that goes into that space we thought about, and we researched it. So we paid teachers to do the research, and they came back with ideas, and we did what a good process would do, is test them out, pilot, and we came up with some ideas, and we have about half of our spaces done. And so we're still working on that, and they're really never done because I have teachers that want to revise now. So we're starting that process with the first group. But that's kind of where we're at, where I was invited into that process. And I do speak around the country about this, and I invite other people to join us in rethinking learning spaces. So,
All right, Mike, thank you. Kevin?
Hi, David. I teach design to middle schoolers in southern New Jersey in a makerspace we built ourselves with the assistance and visioning help of David Jakes in July of 2015. I was given the opportunity to create a STEAM program from scratch, and I was influenced very early on by the work of Emily Tillotson at the Project in North Carolina, and the movie If You Build It changed my worldview dramatically when given the opportunity to create a program. And so we decided to not just make a STEAM program like anyone else had, but to build one based on design, which is what we've done. And I'm already jealous that I'm not in my classroom because Brian's looks pretty amazing, and I wish mine was in the background to be competitive. But we have a great opportunity. We've created a learning space that is giving kids an unprecedented amount of control over their learning. They're extremely excited to be there. They're doing things that the school's never been done before, and we have we're helping to transform the school culture, and which are connecting out into the classrooms as well.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a wide range of opportunities, the kinds of things that are taking place in schools. There's some commonalities associated with your work. It's about improving spaces for student learning. I'm interested in, we'll get to this, about exploring the processes that you use, because there's some patterns and trends there that will be helpful for others to know about. The next question I have for you, and anyone can jump in and ask this, is, or answer this, I'm sorry. What got you started on this? Why the urgency, or why the process, and why stepping into this now? Mike, you talked a little bit about why you did that, but maybe the others can supply a reason why spaces, why now, and what was the motivating factor for moving forward with?
For us, it was several things. One is comments coming from students about their discomfort, and individual teachers, especially at our elementary school, taking it upon themselves to work with their students and coming up with better spaces. But a big driver at the high school was that we went one-to-one iPads 6 years ago, and we felt like the spaces weren't really reflecting the mobile practices that the technology was affording, and they weren't creating very flexible spaces for teachers to try new things, even though we were encouraging them to try new things. And so we were really trying to make spaces that, we also have a big focus on social emotional learning, So we were really trying to bring all those pieces together and design or allow input into spaces by students and teachers, and design spaces that were more responsive to what our teaching actually, what we wanted teaching to look like in our classrooms.
Okay. So Carolyn, just real quick, I'm interested to, you're saying that the one-to-one program suggested that there was an opportunity to redesign spaces to support technology more effectively, correct?
Right, right.
It's
And that's still a piece we're
working
working on a little bit, because there's things where teachers are still tethered to projectors, and we're working with Apple TV setups in different parts of the building. But we really wanted teachers to be able to move around the room a lot more flexibly, and they were trying to innovate, some of them with the instruction they were doing, and have students collaborate more and team more, and the spaces were just crammed full of desks. Our rooms are all different sizes, and our building was built in '69 and then added on to, so we've got a lot of different spaces, and so the giant old desks with the racks underneath were just so tight in some of those rooms too. So we were really trying to make it more mobile and adaptable.
Okay. How about some of the others?
So I like what,
kind of came on. Go ahead.
Brian,
so
go ahead.
Just briefly, I just like what Carolyn said about setting up the battle between the curriculum and what we're asking teachers to do and the classroom. We defined the battle, and we started to define what are they battling on a daily basis, what the curriculum's asking them to do, and what they're trying to do to battle that, which set us up for our project, is to really define the battle lines and say, okay, what are you struggling with? And that really helped us to kind of get a direction on where we wanted to go.
Brian, go ahead.
Well, and ours kind of was similar to Carolyn's in that, we rolled out the one-to-one program, and we expected to see certain behaviors and representations of learning that we didn't see at an institutional level, and that became quite frustrating. And so we tried to say, okay, well, what could accelerate this? And really, the building of this space, the one I'm in now, was kind of the build it and they will come model. Well, if we build spaces like this, students will come and all of a sudden they'll be creative. And we found, again, that didn't work. So a lot of our discovery came out of failure, that we were searching for answers and thinking, like, why isn't this taking? And it wasn't until we really started, becoming exposed to design thinking and the process of design, and working with people like David, where we kind of realized that you had to be very intentional about how you develop spaces and what learning outcomes you want to see. And so when we started doing that, and even doing low fidelity small prototypes, we started to see an increase in that type of behavior. So, we've gone Common Core, and it's rooted in design and making and modeling and revision and iteration. And we found when we evaluated our space, we don't have any spaces that reflect that behavior, reflect creativity, exploration, even research, working kids go and research in private spaces. So it came out of failure for us, and now we're on a journey to collaboratively design through student voice, teacher voice, community voice, spaces that reflect the type of learning experience we want.
Okay. One of the things that I hear in this conversation, and I'd like to explore just for a second, is that do you design the spaces around instruction or around learning? Do you focus on teacher behaviors? Do you focus on student learning? What's the principal driver here? I think this is a point that's really worthy of exploration for helping the audience understand, when we're talking about why are you stepping into this. Is it to improve teacher practice? Is it to improve student learning? Or perhaps is it to do both? What's your primary focus?
For us, it's student learning, and that's taken a lot of growth. I think if you did a snapshot, like a photo walk of our school, and we've done that, like done learning walks, and evaluated that, a lot of them are set up for the teacher when we're here to be focused on student learning, and that's the sad thing. And so it's a tough process to continually refocus to that student learning aspect, to that student-centric kind of model, but that's what we focus on.
Okay.
So one thing that there's three parts to that, I think, David, that when I thought about your question. One was we went and visited places in Silicon Valley and in Irvine, like progressive companies, and what we saw is that they had spaces that were designated for certain types of activities. Now, we can't afford to do that in a classroom necessarily. In the library, maybe there's spots that we can do that, but in a classroom, we have to have the space shift into those different modes. So we designed our space not only for teaching or didactic teaching or all different kinds of teaching, but also for the kids to learn. But there's a component that I think people forget about, and that's just the optimal space to be as a human. I mean, one of the things that we thought about is like, what's the ideal temperature? It's not just for learning; it's just for to live. And what's the greatest? What kind of smells make you comfortable and feel safe, and things like that. And like, for example, we looked at the walls, the color of the walls, and we said, what color should we paint these walls? Well, we found out a lot of people. There's a lot of research to show that different colors have different impact on learning. And so we ended up saying, well, let's just point hue lights at these walls and change the color with our iPad. So we adjust the color of our walls based on an iPad. So we try to be creative in our solutions, but I think part of it is like really thinking about people and just like how people, where you would want to be as a person.
So it's about understanding human beings, right? And about understanding and being intimately being tapped into that and using that as design in the process of design. One of the things I want to mention that if you're watching live online or live on, you can certainly chat on the K12 Online Conference /live, or certainly feel free to communicate and share ideas using the hashtag K12 Online Conference. Or I'm sorry, K12 Online Conf. CONF. Okay. So Kevin, in terms of your spaces and going into that, tell us a little bit about and share your perspectives on the focus of your program as well as your space and how they're linked together.
Well, we had a great opportunity to vision the program, as I mentioned earlier, in July, with a group of cross-functional team of stakeholders, was notably absent, and as a learning point for us was students, unfortunately. But we had administrators, teachers, school board members, librarian, and David and several other folks spend a day with us answering the question of what a 21st century learning environment really looked like. And although that phrase gets a lot of abuse and it's often discredited, it was a great context for discussion with productive tensions that David expertly walked us through throughout the day that helped us develop a manifesto that in turn helped us come up with a mantra which guides our work today, which the 4 words are care, think, design, and act. And so that was really a function of my being fascinated with the work, again, if I'm going to build in the movie, If You Build It. And we realized that if we were going to bring back shop class, which is what we wanted to do, we wanted to orient the projects around things the community needed. There's such many examples of wonderful STEAM programs that do wonderful projects where, as Chris Lehman might point out, they are sort of recipe-based. We wanted to avoid that. Like the plague, we wanted to be unique and different, and so we decided to fixate on design as the center of the program, which was pretty terrifying, since I have no design background at all. And although I think the greatest learning point is that my learners see me and my peers see me as in the mix, learning with the students. As David would say, we learn design by doing design. And I had a very successful first year. The students ended up doing capstone projects that got a lot of attention. They were directly community related. The 7th grade one, which is a good one, I'll mention this in the interest of time, was a collaboration with Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia, where the students studied the provocation, how they can make hospitals less scary for children, which resulted in the 3 top teams being brought to Philadelphia to Jefferson, where they presented their projects to the folks there, and the projects are in various stages of being potentially implemented at the hospital. So we wanted to make a program that was grounded in reality, authentic experiences, as we say. And the space we've created does that. It's flexible, it's student-centered. They do things that they've never been able to do before. Writable surfaces is a great example. The walls, the desks themselves. And so it's really created an environment, as I said, is unprecedented in terms of what the kids can do, and they tell me every day.
Okay. So, Kevin, you alluded to, and you talked in depth about the process, and I want to explore that a little bit with the panelists, and we're going to get started in a real easy way. So when people are thinking about space change, whether you're an individual teacher or whether you're a member of an organization that is moving forward, how do you get started? What's your recommendation getting started? Where do you begin? Mike's smiling. But really, how do you step forward? You can answer it either through the lens of an individual teacher or perhaps an organization that wants to move forward. What do you do? How do you get started?
Well, one thing I would say is find like-minded people on your campus or in your organization. We had a committee, but we invited students to be part of that committee, as well as teachers, as well as administrators. But a lot of the people that were on the committee already had a pre-existing interest in design, and so I think that helped further the conversation more quickly, because you weren't having the conversations about should this be done. We were already on the same page about that. One place I like to suggest for individual teachers to start is Edutopia has a terrific video series that you alluded to in your program on K12 Online Conference, which is Remake Your Class, and it's a 3-part video series, and then they have several articles that talk about how you can gather input from teachers and from the students in your class, from teachers, and rethink a space. And I found that really inspiring thing to share. I share it with librarians all the time as well, because I think it's valuable for librarians to consider how to gather input also.
What Caroline's mentioning is the videos, the 3 videos that were done by the Third Teacher Plus, and it's looking at redefining classroom space in math classroom over 2 days of time with $1,000 US. So find like-minded people and get started. What else, you guys? What else can people do to get started?
I'll jump in. Well, obviously, we're all going to be doing some sort of online research. And I would say that I've had some of the best luck following Carolyn's comment by finding like-minded folks on listservs. There's one in particular that has been very helpful, and that's the K12 Fab Labs group in Google. I highly recommend that for folks doing this work. It's a select group of folks that are very innovative and very willing to share, and learned a great deal about these technologies and what works and what doesn't work from them. In addition, on Twitter, the hashtag DTK12Chat has been a terrific resource to identify folks that have ideas that I want to learn more about and connect with face-to-face when given the opportunity. So I would look for, in addition to websites like Edutopia, which is fabulous as well, Twitter and Google groups that are topical. Okay,
thank you. Brian, I'm sort of interested, in terms of the context of the question of getting started, more about building a space and having the expectation of building that they will come. Would you recommend that as a way to get started, to build the space first and then expect that they'll be used?
In my experience, that doesn't work. And actually, we attended the NAIS conference last year in the Bay Area, and they did a survey on a lot of the NAIS schools. We surveyed them all and asked them, how long did it take for you to see kind of the returns you were expecting when you invested in a space, such as a makerspace, a STEM lab, a library? And the heads of schools and principals that were surveyed said it generally took 5 to 6 years to see the returns they were expecting. And then they compared and contrasted that with the build it with them and they will come. And they asked them the same question. They said that they saw sustainable returns right away, that they saw a return on their investment even during the process. And one director that was a part of it actually said she walked into a school and they'd already started building a makerspace or a new library or whatever it was, a new kind of showcase space. And she made everyone stop. She's like, the contractors, everything, she said, stop what you're doing right now. Put down your hammers. We're going about this the wrong way. And then archived the whole process and went through it. And that's been my experience. And with teachers now, we, you know, when we're starting small scale in a classroom, we kind of run them through some group empathy activities and get them to focus on a driver and launch early a bit. We want them to launch early, iterate throughout, and, you know, learn from prototypes. But we definitely see the value in gaining empathy from the user. And teachers have reflected that they didn't know how much their students cared. They didn't know how much impact it could have. And when we've done that and facilitated that, we hear back and back saying, oh, we should ask students a bit more about curriculum alignment, or we should ask students more about their e-portfolios. And it's amazing how much, like, even still, we know student voice is important. We know it's essential and important to learning, but still there's still areas of improvement. And that's kind of, starting with students is a good place as well.
And Mike, you know, in terms of, you know, Brian mentioned some timelines in terms of seeing impact. Would you agree with that in terms of how long, you know, you get started, and how long does it take to see an impact? It has to be, you see it right away. There has to be a sustained effort to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I think in our situation, I come about this as more of an administrator looking to get a lot of teachers involved. So for us, it started with that invitation and volunteers, because we didn't want to push this on people that didn't want to do it. But I will say that anything good starts with an invitation, and people really took up the challenge. And one of the things that I appealed to their inner rebel side, because we talked about breaking down every traditional thing you've ever thought about in a classroom and analyzing it. Like, why do you put student work on the walls? Why is that in our observations when principals come in and they look at your room? Is it really effective? And our teachers found out that it, you know, to be quite honest, it really isn't. If it stays up there a long time, which most of that work stays up there too long. So we did a lot of research on, like, just rethinking everything and being, like, kind of rebellious. And that was fun for the teacher. The teachers kind of like that feeling of, like, hey, we're the rebels. We're going to rethink this. The problem with that, though, is we're seeing that principals don't always agree with our ideas. But you have to empower those teachers to make decisions that might fail. For example, right now we have a teacher that wants to paint the ceiling black because they've seen that it opens up the space instead of white, traditional white. Now it seems like a simple thing, but the principal doesn't like this idea, I don't think. But the teachers really like it, and I'm gonna figure out a way to let them do that and experiment and see if it does do what they think it's going to do.
Would the panelists agree that moving forward with learning spaces, there has to be a culture of trial and error, of acceptance, of trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't? Does that make sense? And not be afraid to try these things?
I think so, completely. And, you know, one of the things we did in our pilot was the teachers applied to participate, and we had questions for them based around our design drivers to see, you know, how kind of get them to start thinking. Really, it was a tool to get them to start thinking about it. But I feel like we, by inviting them in that way, we had better participation, because they, like you were saying, we weren't forcing it on anybody. It was people who were voluntarily coming in to participate in the process. And I do think that made a difference throughout. And the other thing we did was provide professional development support. So we actually had a day and a half. We had a day with David Jakes. And then partway this fall, we identified some things in our survey where we felt like teachers, the classroom learning wasn't adapting to the space in certain areas. And so we had a really focused PD session that was both on using your space more creatively, but also on good instructional practices that were much more student-centered. And teachers went right back and used some of those strategies. And so, and then just giving people choice, like Michael was saying, giving teachers options to pick colors and give input into the design when we were initially working on it, and very specific input. I think that also, and giving students that same opportunity, I think that also really made an impact on the speed with which we've seen changes happening, is what I'm trying to work my way around to. That because the grassroots voices were listened to, and because they were voluntary participants, it feels like the change in the practices is happening faster. And that is really what you want.
Carolyn, in any you can jump in here. When spaces change, do you see an expansion of the kinds of instructional practices teachers do employ? Is it a catalyst for rethinking the way in which what takes place? Have we seen new kinds of practices emerge as a result of space change?
I don't think it would have happened for us if it had just been furniture, if we hadn't had a process, if we hadn't done professional development support. Okay. Just furniture by itself, I don't think would have given everyone that same sense of we're having an experiment. We're in here to make some changes.
Okay. In the keynote, in my keynote, one of the things that I mentioned a number of times throughout each of the 4 segments is focusing on experience first and things second. And so I want to just jump into really quick, maybe a couple of minutes of discussion around process. All of you are mentioning. Sorry about that. All of you are mentioning different kinds of pilot experiences. Talk to me a little bit about your processes and what has worked. Kevin, do you want to lead us off and tell us about I think you already talked about process a little bit. What was the most successful thing in what your process or supported or guaranteed in your experience?
The most successful part of the process for us has been, is my audio okay? Everybody can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Does that look better? Yeah, sorry about the background noise. The most successful part of the process for us has been embracing design thinking through the activities that we do in my program. We call them design experiences. I was very opposed to the idea of a quarterly STEM rotation class, and specifically for the issues involving seeing people for a certain amount of time and then not seeing them for the rest of the year. So we designed a series of experiences where I see the students for 5 days in a row, and then unfortunately it's 6 weeks until I see them again. But it's really worked well for us because I've been able to create an arc of experiences throughout the school year that culminated in a very powerful set of learnings for the students, specifically around the capstones that they completed at the end of the school year. So we had the time to intentionally explore design and what it meant for these students, which I should point out, when we started to give kids control of their own learning, they were perplexed. They honestly did not know how to react. They were used to being told what to do, and when we told them, incidentally, there's no grades in my class, they were completely confused. What? No grades? What? And how is this going to work? And so what we were able to find is that once they got the notion that they were actually in control of the experience, that their interest level went off the charts. The creativity and the things that they've been able to come up with, the solutions they've been able to design are amazing. We've got kids working on projects through their lunch hour. So it's clear that we have created a safe space where they can express their creativity and the learnings that they are applying, the skills that they're getting in their other subjects has just been amazing.
Okay, let's focus on what are must-haves in a process. Anybody can jump in here. What do you have to have in a process? Carolyn mentioned professional development. What else?
For us, it's the process, to be honest. We've jumped to solutions a lot and purchased furniture. For example, we purchased the Node chairs, we purchased the Verb desks and all those things and put them in a class and didn't support them and didn't put them in there with any discovery process. And now, so we're a 2,400 student school, N through 12, and we're going into classes N through 12 with our kind of lead innovators. We have a kind of team like Carolyn was talking about of people who wanted to join. And we have 62 people on the team, 62 educators who volunteer to be a part of this one of 4 groups. And so we're redesigning like 16 spaces with them, and going through and fleshing out, well, what does the discovery process look like for a nursery student, for a grade 3 up to grade 12? And then what does iteration look like? What does, prototyping, so on and so forth. So the kind of transference of skills for them, I kind of echo what Kevin said. They never thought they would be given a voice. They never thought they could be that creative. And the solutions, you really have to relinquish control, because it's so easy to go into a space and think, oh, I know it would be great in here. And that's the biggest challenge for me, is like avoiding jumping to solutions with everyone you work with students, with teachers, and committing to the process and being like, all right, well, this is something that we believe in, and that we can then, once we develop our drivers, kind of refer back to. That becomes our rubric, right? And kids love it when you say that. They say, there's going to be no rubric for this. There's going to be no grades. And they're like, what? No grades? How are we going to evaluate this? Well, we're going to go through the process. We're going to connect to the drivers, which you helped us develop. They're like, wow. I'm like, yeah, that's how the real world works. That's how everything you're wearing works. Everything you're touching has gone through this process. So selling design as a creativity and product development process has been kind of a big epiphany moment for us. When I first started working with design thinking, that wasn't my mindset or our mindset in our community. But now we're seeing that, you know what, this is a skill that every kid needs, really, because it's transferable now. It's not transferable when they graduate, right? It's not transferable later. So that process and I guess committing to it was a big thing for us.
Mike, I want to prompt you with this. You've done it for a number of years now. What's changed over time in the process?
So I think I was thinking about process, and you guys have hit on a lot of the things that we've done. But a couple things that stand out to me as things that I didn't realize were important until a little bit later, and that was including parents in on the conversation and getting them. I've gotten them to actually donate money to the rooms. The reason this is important isn't necessarily the money, which is good to have for the rooms, but it's also the fact that they are invested in the process and they care about it. So one of the things that we've raised about $500,000 for those rooms in the last 3 years, and based on like showing them what we're doing and having them sit in the rooms and talking to them about the rooms. So that process was important. The other thing that was really important, and I didn't realize how important, is to meet the basic needs of teachers before you redesign their rooms. So it's really important to sit down with teachers and make sure that the copy machine is working and everything else is working, because if you don't have the basic needs working and you start doing this crazy, what seems to be kind of, expensive and extravagant, they're going to be really upset with you. So that was one of the key things for buy-in, is to make sure we talked to these teachers and made sure all basic needs were being met. And then the last thing I was thinking about that really impacted our program is having people tour through our rooms. Every week, every other week, we have people coming in from Russia or all over the world, actually. We have people from Sweden and all over California come through our rooms and look at them. And that really solidifies the teacher's commitment to the room, but they also like to show their room and they're proud of their room. And I think having that as part of the process is really important, that they're going to be relied on to share what they've learned in our district with other districts. So I think that's important.
Okay. So we've been focusing on process and at an organizational level, to make changes at a school level, or district level, you do need a process. Design and being intentional and being inclusive and providing professional development and iteration. You can learn more about that on the keynote. So I want to shift gears a little bit and move away from an organization kind of construct to individual teachers, and let's help individual teachers understand some ideas about spaces. What I want to talk about now for a second is things. Consider classrooms and the kinds of things that made a difference for teacher practice. Okay, and I'm going to ask you to give me that, as each one of you have found it to be extremely valuable in when we're talking about learning space change and what it can possibly be.
Um, so some things that we found valuable. I'm in a library, but I've been working with this classroom pilot. Um, One thing is teacher desks that roll and having some sort of different sort of teacher desks. Ours are from two different vendors, but they're tables that roll, and we have rolling small podiums so teachers can move the piece of furniture. And so we're talking about what pieces in particular or what unique opportunities some specific pieces of furniture have offered us or for the classroom for people to get started. In our library, I'm trying to think of library in beta mode now. And so we redid a computer lab that had stationary tables with folding flip tables that can flip down. They're whiteboards, so students can write on them. They can roll to the side. We can put them in all sorts of different configurations. So our library computer lab went from being a lab to being a brainstorming space. So the flip tables I think are important. And then students' wheels. That has been in our surveys of students. We got some chairs with wheels and some without, and the teachers were very nervous about having all wheels. But overwhelmingly in our surveys for both teachers and students, the idea of having wheels and being able to twist and turn, and that allows the teacher to be in different parts of the room too, because the kids can just turn around, look wherever they are. So that's been a piece if you're looking at specifics that that we found valuable.
Okay, so what we're looking for is a 30-second explanation of, when you think about classroom design, what are the things that have made a difference for teachers in classrooms? Because teachers want to know, in terms of time to take a step in, what's going to be the biggest bang for the buck? What are the things that wins? 30 seconds, what worked?
I'll jump in, David. Writable desk surfaces. We use a product called Sketchpad, which is a clear paint coating on top of desks, and it completely transforms how the kids interact with each other and the material.
Okay. So yeah, writable surface, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Keep going, gang. What else? So we've got different kind of flexible furniture, writable surfaces. What else?
For us, really removing the teacher desk, realizing the kind of ecology of the space and how much that teacher desk tends to take up. It can be upwards of 30% in the classroom, and so students won't use that space. So changing the configuration of the room not to be single focused, front focused, but to be maybe dual focused or tri-focused. So having multiple spaces for sharing, collaborating, presenting. There were two kind of big tipping points.
Okay. So, can everybody hear me?
It's breaking in and out for me.
A bit.
I think I'm struggling with bandwidth here in my hotel.
We'll just keep talking. Let's
So
see.
we've got flexible and
Michael, you want to go?
what else?
Sure, I'll go. So I was thinking about this, and the one thing, if I was going to buy one thing, it really, when we think of a space, we think of the atmosphere and everything that has to do with the space, not just the furniture or physical things. But if I was going to buy one thing, I would do audio amplification in a classroom. It's made the biggest difference for our teachers to create an environment that's calm and collected. And studies have been really good about audio amplification, reducing teacher stress level, increasing language arts scores, and lowering discipline problems in the classroom. So that's the one I would do. If I was going to do one thing, would be a mic. And we're experimenting with a thing called a catch box for the second mic for the kids. And you take this box, it's like a styrofoam box, and you throw it, and it has a mic in it, and that's what the kids speak into for their answer. So so that's the one thing I would do, because I find that teachers that are really loud, it makes them be calm, and teachers that are really quiet, it gives them that voice they need in the classroom.
Yeah,
I know it's an old school thing, but That's what I would do first.
Okay. Anything else you want to add into this? What else
I
can
think
teachers step into? Yes.
I really like, we've put portable soft seating in all of the rooms, like hockey stools or buoys from steel case. And the teachers and students all really love them. The students like that they can pull up to someone else's desk sort of in an informal way. And even if you couldn't change the desk in your classroom, I think adding these sorts of mobile stools create more of a sense that students can move around, sit next to someone, position themselves differently. And teachers like them because they can pull up a stool to a teacher's desk and really sit face to face, and it creates a different dynamic. So I think that's, if I could do only one thing, that might be a good starting point for me.
Okay.
Something
So
kind of similar.
go ahead, Ben.
Sorry, something to what Kevin said. Kevin said writable desks. I know something that has worked well at our school is writable walls, as you can see behind me. Just the opportunity to have ideas everywhere, whether this is in a classroom or in a common space, and leaving prompts for kids and giving them the opportunity to just write down their idea, and then someone from the next class can come in and build on that. That was a huge thing for us, and that was kind of like one of those big, like the new iPad moment. Like, oh wow, everyone, once it worked for one person, all of a sudden everyone wanted it. So that was pretty a big hit for us.
So as we move forward in this, you've obviously made a number of changes, and talk to us a little bit about the impact that's had in the changes in learning. I'm specifically interested in when you add writable surface, when you remove the teacher desk and give kids or repurpose that space, when you add movement into and all the things that the panelists have talked about. What are the big shifts in learning, and do changing the spaces really impact how kids learn? Or not so much teaching. So what's been the difference that you've seen by making those changes?
So we surveyed our students before last spring, before we put the classrooms in place, and we've surveyed them about 3 weeks ago to see, how their impressions had changed. And we did it around our design drivers. So we were looking at things like, did they feel like they had more ability to collaborate in class? Did they feel like they had more ability to be creative? Did they feel more ownership of their learning? And the responses were just astounding. It was clearly had an impact on how they felt about their ownership of their learning, and how they felt about being creative in the classroom. And so that was really empowering to see those results, self-reported results.
Okay, so ownership, you found that they've had a greater degree of ownership, that's resulted in a more creative approach for learning?
And collaboration, yeah.
Collaboration, okay. Anybody want to jump in terms of the impact on learning?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I have to say that one of the most rewarding aspects of the program that we've seen is the students that we are reaching. The student body that we've got is in our school probably fairly typical for the socioeconomic area where we are. But what we've noticed that's really fascinating is that we're reaching students that we never reached before. By giving these students an opportunity to express their creativity and give them design challenges that require them to collaborate and the ability to use tools and to solve real world problems, we have students that in the past struggled through sitting through class and had difficulty paying attention and had issues with each other that absolutely are on fire when they're in my room and doing the work that we do. So it's been incredibly satisfying to see kids transform. Literally, we've had multiple instances of students that were unrecognizable to themselves by the end of their year with us. One of whom, incidentally, is a student at Science Leadership Academy, and who I hope to be presenting with at EduCon this year about his experience.
Okay. Ryan, single biggest factor in terms of learning. What's changed with learning as a result of your space work?
Well, something in our elementary school, which I haven't mentioned or that I haven't heard mentioned, is we developed a space that focused on the social emotional learning aspect. So we developed an open mind zone that upon first glance might resemble a sort of analog makerspace. And it was our counselor and one of our tech integrationists that really proposed it. And really their focus wasn't creativity, it wasn't exploration, it was teaching kids to share, teaching kids to cope with, having to rebuild something over and over again. And the impact on learning that has been significant. Kids, that room is the most booked room in the elementary school and the most accessed when kids have a choice. And to go in there and see kids that normally didn't have a place now have a space. And the joy that they have being in there from a social emotional learning aspect has been revolutionary for us. And that wasn't something we thought we'd see. That wasn't something we were even really looking for. It really took a leader and a counselor to kind of say, you know what, let's give this a try. And it's a great mix between those two worlds. And so the impact on learning, we've seen an increase in risk taking. Kids, when you ask them, how do you feel when you come to school? And, a lot of them will say stressed, bored, tired, and, anxious. But when they come to that space, it's joy, wonder, comfort, relaxed. And so now how do you export that to other spaces is kind of the challenge.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? When you see something that works like that, a magnet space, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see that kind of impact. The question is how do you take the successful components of that space and enlarge them to other areas to go to scale, so to speak? Mike, same question for you. Single biggest impact that you saw with your space changes?
I think the biggest thing I see is just more active learning. So when I go into spaces that are the traditional desks, and which we have a lot of those left, it seems very passive, and even the way kids sit and the way they're interacting with each other. But the minute you go into one of our new spaces, and if you sit there a whole period, you'll see a range of activities, where in a traditional class you'll see maybe one shift, or maybe that shift is for the whole week. But in these new classrooms, you'll see changing, like active students that are doing different things, with each other, or there could be points where it's just the old style of just getting information. But I think it's just that the ability to shift, and we're also seeing a lot of use of our outside spaces now. Our mics also have a little pod that goes with them, so the teacher can listen in on the groups, so you can actually hear what's going on in the groups. The kids can take that pod out with them outside, and you can hear what's happening. So we're using our outside spaces a little more.
Okay. All right, so we're winding down here. We've got a few minutes left, and so we want to finish with a statement from each one of you about if you had a chance to sit down with a teacher or someone that wanted to improve their spaces, what's the one recommendation that you would make for that teacher? So 30 seconds to a minute about what's a single recommendation you would make to help teachers move forward with this.
I'll jump in if I can.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Kevin. 1 minute.
Yeah, so I think so many teachers are so busy with so much going on in their lives and so much that they need to do that they're intimidated by the idea of a wholesale redesign of a learning space. So my suggestion would be for them to carve a section of a day, an afternoon, even an hour, to put the kids in charge of learning and really to sit with them and say, if we were going to do this material in a different way, or give you more control over your space in terms of how it would be arranged, what would it look like? What would you change? And see what you can make happen.
Okay, so the first step is sitting down with the kids and talking about spaces and what they mean for learning, correct? Okay, simple thing, easy to do. Who's next?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. And I'd say that whether it was a library or a classroom, I think there's a lot of different ways you can get student feedback too, whether it's talking with them in class or doing a visual board where you have them put sticky notes on it, which Edutopia, the third teacher, recommends, or having them do video interviews of themselves with a GoPro as they go through their classrooms. there's lots of ways to gather that student input and really get a bird's eye view of a student's view of the classroom.
Okay, so you're looking at continuing to understand the relationship of space to learning through a student lens. Because
Yes.
it's their space, right? Okay. Brian, what could you do? What's the one recommendation?
Because it seems like I'm cutting out.
Yeah, you're okay.
You're good.
All right, cool. So, yeah, but getting feedback from students, correct?
No, I'm asking about if you had one recommendation for teachers to get started. What would the single thing be that they could do to get started? One single final comment to the teachers.
For them, I like the idea of turning it over to students, but kind of having that collaborative day of just, talking about what do you want learning to look like? What do you want learning to feel like? Connecting with the emotion of learning. I think that's in standards and rubrics and assessment. And I think that's of value very much too. I think if you have a discussion with students and parents and teachers about what you want it to feel like, I think you can really connect and then build spaces that as well.
Okay, so again, it's about an inclusive process. It's about sitting down and talking about how learning takes place and how space can support that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I know this sounds strange, but I would get an intervention partner to come into my classroom and look at the clutter in my classroom and just to declutter my classroom, because one of the studies have shown like that clutter in the classroom really has a big impact on ADHD kids and a variety of learning issues. So I would start with decluttering, and it's free, it's cheap, and just start with decluttering, and then I would get an account on Pinterest, and I would tell them to go to IKEA, because start with inexpensive things that you can do and Home Depot and DIY, because some of those things you may not want to have permanent. So start with some like simple ideas that they could do that are very inexpensive, and then I would go with then that's the start of the process. That's a good start.
Okay, all right. So as we talk, as we summarize some of this, we're talking about the opportunity to make significant changes in terms of learning, about opportunities to help teachers look at way too, because they inhabit that space as well. So I think the panelists have done a great job of providing ideas about process, some of the impacts that have taken place as a result of their actions, and some really appropriate strategies for moving forward. So I hope that you take some of these ideas and see them through your lens, and perhaps begin to initiate some changes in space, and give it it's about trying things. It's about learning, about iterating and prototyping and moving forward in a meaningful and thoughtful way, all focused on engaging the kids, right, and having them as design partners. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan, and at this particular time, on behalf of all four of the panelists and myself, thank you for spending time with us tonight. I'm sure that you can follow their work online on Twitter, certainly. And Susan, it's all yours. Thank you very much.
Well, it's me who would like to thank all of you. You've really given us a lot to think about, a lot of first steps to begin for those who might not be as brave and want to jump in completely. It's students first, and that's what we're all about in education. And I think that's really what you've been talking about today. So thanks again. We can continue the discussion in Voxer and via the slow chat. You can join our Voxer channel at bit.ly/K12 Online Conf Voxer and chime in. Please tweet with the hashtag K12 Online Conf. Your tweets will show up in our slow chat at bit.ly/K12 Online chat, as well as on Twitter. Keep watching the K12 Online Conference.org space for information about our upcoming mini conferences. The next one will take place the week of January 9th to 13th in 2017 with the theme of design thinking. So I think that will be sort of attached to some of what you've talked about, but really looking a lot more at the students themselves. The keynote speaker will be John Spencer. So thanks everyone for joining us. Good evening. From the free conference you can always come back to. Thanks all.